Prahladanada Prahladanada Yasodananda Prahladanada Yamuna Tirhanacharya Yamuna Tirhanacharya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Vishupad Paramahansa Pravadakasharya Asadhara Sadushi Shiman His Divine Grace Shalasi Bhaktivedanta Swami Raj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Gaur Premanande all glories to the sound devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Namo Vishnu Vadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutaya Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswatam Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paskatyade Satarne Om Agana Timirandasya Gananjana Salaya Chakshura Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Idati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shiguro Shri Uta Parakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shiva Sakans Vitams Cha Hey Krishna Karna Sindho Dinabando Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prishubhanu Siddha Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakapa Tribhyascha Kripa Sindhuvyevacha Patiranam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Pranitinanda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 6, Creation of the Universal Form, Text number 11. Atatasya vitaptasya katidaya tananiha nirabidyanta devanam tanime gadataha shrinu atatasya vitaptasya katidaya tananiha nirabidyanta devanam tanime ganta shrinu. Mataji? Ata tatasya vitasya katidaya tenaniha nirabidyanta devanam tani me gata takshinu ata. Therefore, tasya, his, abhitaptasya, in terms of his contemplation, katida, how many, ayatanani, embodiments, ha, there were, niravidyanta, by separated parts, devanam, of the demigods, tani, all those, megadata, described by me, Shrinu, just here. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Maitreya said, out here for me, how the demigods after the manifestation of the gigantic universal form. Purport. The demigods are separated parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, as are all other living entities. The only difference between the demigods and the ordinary living entities is that when the living entities are rich in pious acts of devotional service to the Lord, and when their desire to lord over the material energy has vanished, they are promoted to the post of demigods, or entrusted by the Lord with executing the management of the universal affairs. Text 12. Agni, or heat, separated from his mouth, when all the directors of material affairs entered into it in their respective positions. By that energy, the living entity expresses himself in words. Purport. The mouth of the gigantic universal form of the Lord is the source of the speaking power. The director of the fire element is a controlling deity, or Adidaiva. The speeches delivered are Adhyatma, or bodily functions, and the subject matter of the speeches is material productions, or the Adibhuta principle. Namo Vishnu Vidaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutaya Śrīmate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswatam Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskadyade Satarane. Third canto, after the second canto, is still speaking about the universal form. Prabhupada states in the second canto of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, in a number of places, that to hear about Krishna's pastimes in the external energy is more beneficial for the conditioned soul than to hear about his pastimes in the internal energy. After all, Krishna says, Aham sarvasya prabhavo matak sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvitaha. That he's the source of all the material and the spiritual worlds. From him the entire creation flows. The wise who know this perfectly engage in devotional service and worship him with all their heart. So to see Krishna's pastimes in the internal energy is good, at least you hear about it, but unless one has purified senses, one will not get at least the full effect of such a hearing process. Nor is it possible in our daily activities to exactly apply Krishna's pastimes in the internal energy. Those who try to do that are known as sahajiyas. They imagine themselves to be on the spiritual platform and doing spiritual activities simply by imitating Krishna's activities in this spiritual energy. And therefore we find sometimes such sahajiyas, they choose some young ladies and they engage in a so-called rasa dance with them. On the other hand, to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has come to show us how to engage in this material world and at the same time be engaged in spiritual activities, namely the Sankirtan movement, which the dancing, the chanting, and the Sankirtan movement is exactly the same as Krishna's Rasa Leela in the spiritual energy. But it's done without invitation. It's done in glorification simply of Krishna. On the other hand, if one advances in devotional service and Krishna consciousness, then as Krishna says, Sarvabhutastam Atmanam, Sarvabhutani Chatmani, Ikshite Yoga Yuktatma, Sarvatra Samadarshana. That the true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees every being in me. Indeed, the self-realized soul sees me, the same Supreme Lord, in everything. Yomam Pashati Sarvatra, Sarvam Chamayi Pashati, Tasyaham na pranashami na chame na pranashiti. And for one who sees me everywhere and who can see everything in me, I am no loss to him, nor is he ever lost to me. In other words, what we're looking at in the material world is a variety of simply the same energies, namely, Bhumir Apadalo Vayu Kamano Buddhevacha Ahankara Iti Ame Bina Prakriti Ashita. Earth, of course, when we say earth, we don't mean simply a clod of earth that you dig up in your backyard. And that's what Krishna says, I'm the earth. No, earth is anything that's solid, like this table here is solid, and therefore we call it earth. Although earth is also 50% solid, and the other four elements are divided up. Ether and water and fire and air compose earth to a certain proportion. Usually it's, well, you can say they're divided up equally, but not always. It depends what the division is. Similarly, water is not exactly water, although water is anything that flows, and the primary characteristic of water is that it binds things together. Therefore, sometimes they say rasa is liquid, because rasa in the spiritual world binds the devotees together with Krishna. So here in the material world, water, rasa, binds things. Like if you have flour and you want to make chapatis, you have to add water. Try to make chapatis without adding any kind of liquid to the flour, and it'll be very difficult. So water is water is the element which we call water, whether it's water or petroleum or anything that's liquid, that can bind things together. Similarly, fire is the ability to transform one thing to another. Heat, just like in our fire, in our stomach, where we perform most of our sacrifices, there's fire, yagya. Aham Vaishnaro Bhutva Praninam Deham Ashitya Pranapana Samayuktva Pachamnanam Chaturvidam. I become the Aham Vaishnava. I become the fire of digestion. Aham Vaishnara Bhutva Praninam Deham Ashitya. And I join with the air of life to digest the 5 kinds of foodstuffs. So fire is what transforms, for instance, water into something else, or transforms water into gas. So fire is the ability for transformation. For instance, in our eyes, there's fire. Because if there's no fire in our eyes, then when we see something, we will not be able to transform it into a vision. The fire in our eyes digests the light that's coming in and transforms it into an image. So the eyes are fiery, the stomach's fiery. Fire is always the basic principle of transformation. And air. Air is what moves everything. Without air, nothing moves. Even our body activities are all conducted by the the life airs. If you tie your finger up and the blood stops and the channels of air stop, you can't move your finger, it becomes numb. Generally, the airs work through the nervous system in the body. And then there's ether. Sound is moving through the ether, space. So this Krishna says, this is my 5 elements in the material world, and everything in the material world is simply a combination and permutation of these 5 gross elements, and then there's the mind, intelligence, and false ego. So this is all there is in the material world in different combinations and permutations. Some combinations we think look beautiful, some of them we are indifferent to, but after all, what we're talking about is simply the same 5 elements, gross elements, and 3 subtle elements, which have nothing actually to do with ourselves, but we become enamored by them, by their different varieties. Especially in modern society, they've created all kinds of imaginary manifestations of the illusory energy. It's bad enough we're an illusion in the illusory energy, but they've been able to combine it in such a way as to make it seem attractive to be in Maya. And usually, whether we know it or not, all they're doing is projecting in our minds something extraordinary. You never see a movie of the person gets up every day at the same time, chants his japa, comes to Mangalarti, takes prasadam, goes on Harinam, comes back, takes an apple and goes to sleep. It's not exciting enough to the materialist. No, there has to be person has to have some kind of extraordinary power, move through the dimensions of space or whatever else, have all kinds of mystic power, and then people find it exciting, because generally everyone's bored in the material world after some time. Punak punas charvita charvananam. Simply chewing the chewed, because there's not much to chew in the material world. It's just the same thing over and over again. The same earth, the same water, the same fire, the same air, the same ether, just in different combinations, and just saying, come and enjoy this one. And you'll actually be happy. But there's not actually that much difference. It's the same thing, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. But Maya, the trick of Maya, she says, this time it's going to be different. But here it mentions that ultimately it's all Krishna. The reason why we're in the material world is because Krishna is attractive. He's all attractive. And even his energy he can make attractive to the conditioned soul, because it's coming from Krishna. And therefore, because it reminds us of Krishna, it reminds us of our relationship with Krishna, therefore we become attracted to it, with the hope that we can actually be happy, that it'll actually give us the same happiness that Krishna gave us. But because it's Krishna, but it's not Krishna, therefore we're always disappointed. Prabhupada gives the example of a little baby crying. They bring the baby from one mother to the next, but the baby keeps on crying until finally the baby gets back onto the lap of its mother, and then it feels satisfied. So tasyaiva heto priyate tiko vido yadlabhite tad upari tamuda talabhite sukhavam anyatak shukam kayena gabir ramasa. That after going up and down throughout all the planetary systems looking for actually something to make us happy, then one realizes that actually there's nothing really going to be achieved here. Because we're simply wandering, looking for Krishna, but we're looking for Krishna in the wrong place. Therefore, Krishna is giving us some idea that we've never been separated from Krishna, because that's not possible. At every moment, eternally, we've been with Krishna. So the idea is where we came from. Well, we don't know where we came from, but one thing's for certain, that we've always been with Krishna, because we can't exist without Krishna. It's not possible. Even now, we're always with Krishna 24 hours a day. Therefore, Krishna says, Sarvasya chaham hridhi sanivishto matak smritira jnanam aponam cha, that he's in our heart. And whatever remembrance we're getting, whatever knowledge we're getting, whatever we're able to forget, because most people don't want to forget because they're in such forgetfulness in Kali Yuga. People are struggling. They have memory courses. Because every day, tatastanujanam dharma, because of dharma being decreased, and every day, tatastanujanam dharma, sattvam socham dharma shama. Every day, all the good qualities that people have are being diminished. And one of them is balena kaliya rajan naksantrana balam smriti. One of them is smriti, forgetfulness. So forgetfulness is very good if it's used properly. If we forget Maya, then we're doing quite well. If we forget Krishna, we're doing very badly. So for the devotee, Krishna helps the devotee forget Maya, and for the non-devotee, Krishna helps the non-devotee forget him. Forgetting him doesn't mean, oh, I can't remember Krishna. It means even the most obvious thing becomes extremely difficult to understand. Just like if you tell a non-devotee that, or even someone who's not aspiring to be a devotee, that your body is changing, but you're not changing, they find it extremely difficult to understand. They have to tax their mind. What are you talking about? My body's changing. I mean, please. I mean, if you can't understand your body's changing, then you're definitely in a very difficult situation. But even more difficult is to understand that my body's changing, but I'm not changing. Because people are so much identified with their body, they think as their body's changing, they're changing. As my mind is changing, I'm changing. As my conception of life changes, so I change. But Maya Pritijnana, because people's intelligence has been stolen by illusion, therefore we find it difficult to convince people even the most simple things. Therefore, one of the 10 offenses is to preach the glories of the Lord to the faithless, because it's like trying to hit your head against the wall. Trying to convince the wall about something. You're not going to convince the wall about anything. All you're going to do is break your head. So try to give people intelligence when they have no intelligence is very difficult. Therefore the chanting of the holy name is introduced, because maybe some of that vibration will enter into the ear and a sprout of intelligence may manifest itself after some time. So, Krishna, from him comes remembrance. Remembrance means to just see what's actually going on here. To remember, is just like at the end of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna asks Arjuna, have you been listening to the class I gave? Krishna was wondering because Arjuna's eyes kept on, he seemed like he was falling asleep during half the class. So he just wanted to make sure he was listening. Have you been paying attention? And Arjuna said, yes, I really thought the Krishna book class you gave was really good. Now let's go to Chaitanya Charitamrita. No, Arjuna said, Nashto moha smritira labdva tat prasena maya chuta stitosmi gata sangdeha karishe vachanam tava. Now I've actually been listening. And how do I know if I've been listening? Because my illusion has been dispelled. And what's our illusion? What is the illusion? Is it some kind of mystic trick that Krishna is playing on Arjuna, and therefore he's pulling rabbits out of hats? And Arjuna was actually caught up thinking actually rabbits were coming out of hats. Was that the illusion? No, it's the same illusion we're all in. I'm this body. I'm this mind. I am from such and such place. This belongs to me. That belongs to him. That's called illusion, because we have nothing to do with the material world. So as we get out of illusion, then we realize that actually I'm not this body. Of course, we don't deny that we have a body. We're not saying that, actually, my dear sir, you think you're a man, but that's an illusion. Actually, you're a woman. That's not what Krishna means by illusion. No, the illusion is that we think we're any kind of product of the material nature, whether man or woman or cat or dog, whatever, because we're spiritual beings. And the illusion is we're identifying ourselves with something we're not. And therefore we're thinking that the material nature is moving under my direction, that when I move the body, it's me alone who are moving the body. Of course, we know that there's some connection between myself and the body. It's not like the body is just moving, or I'm just unconscious of what I'm doing. Maybe I am unconscious, but everyone has some consciousness of what they're doing. But actually we're desiring, and we may not recognize what the link is between our desires and how Krishna is manifesting that desire through his material energy or spiritual energy. Because we lack the connection with Krishna, therefore we think we're doing things independently. Independently of the material nature, independently of Krishna, independently of our karma, independently of so many things. But actually we're completely dependent on our desire. Even our desires are conditioned. So to see that means to get out of illusion, to think that we're the independent doers, that we have something and another, somehow or another we are a product of the material nature, and that we are we have all these designations are our real identity. Therefore one takes initiation not simply so that one can throw grains in the fire and get rid of, swaha, here comes my sinful reactions, look out. That's not the purpose of taking initiation. The purpose of taking initiation is to become free from the false ego and accept the real ego, that I'm the dasa, anudasa of Krishna. And therefore, when we desire to fulfill Krishna's desires, according to Krishna's inspiration, the heart, under the direction of Guru, Sadhana, and Shastra, then Krishna reveals everything to us, just like the sun lights up everything in the daytime. And therefore the illusion goes away. Jnanena tatat agyanam yesham nashitam atmanaha tesham what's that? Nitya, start over. Wow. Dityavaj jnanam prakashati tatparam. Well, however, one is enlightened with the knowledge by which nescience is destroyed, then his knowledge reveals everything, just like the sun lights up everything in the daytime. And how do we get to that platform? Does it come by some kind of miracle, that I'm a nice person, and that somehow or another Krishna he'll like me and he'll give me all kinds of realization? No, it's a practical process. Tad buddhiyas, tad atmanas, tad nishtas, tad parayanaha, gachanyapana avritim, jnananiyadutta kalmasha. One's faith, one's mind, one's refuge, one's intelligence is all fixed in the Supreme, then one becomes cleansed by full knowledge, and thus one proceeds straight on the path of self-realization. And so when we start using our intelligence in Krishna's service, when we start becoming faithful means that we're actually determined. I may see everything perfectly, but unless I'm faithful, I'm not going to apply what I see. So the beginning is hearing. Hearing is food for the intelligence. But hearing and intelligence has different phases. One of them is that we're hearing, we're trying to hear, but unless it enters into our heart, then we won't be able to capture it. It won't make any sense to us. We may be sitting here so-called listening or hearing, but we may not be capturing very much. We actually have to capture what's being said in our heart. So we can tell whether we're actually listening or not if we can remember what we heard. we don't remember what we heard, we haven't really heard anything. If you open this any book and you read something, you close the book and you can't remember which book you just opened, it's not a good sign. Therefore we have books so we can open up the book again and again, but then we should close it and see if we actually remembered anything, if we actually captured something. It's like Rahu. You heard of Rahu? Rahu has a head, but he doesn't have a body. So he's always hungry. So he eats something, but there's no process of digesting it. Therefore he's always hungry. So if we read Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Bhagavad Gita, and we don't digest it, there's nothing, we don't actually eat it and assimilate it and digest it, then we'll always be hungry. Think, well, I read that book, whatever that book was, but I haven't gotten anything out of it because we haven't digested it. We haven't assimilated it. We haven't put it into practice. We haven't realized it, experienced it. So we think these books are just some kind of theory, some weird topic now about Krishna's fire of voice or the mouth or something in some kind of universal form, some kind of really unusual thing. Krishna, thousand-headed Vishnu, and his arms are with his clubs and his discs, and he has all these fire coming out of his mouth, as it says here, Agni or heat separated from his mouth. You tell that to people on the street, they'll call the 911, they'll come and take you away and put you into the nice padded house. Because unless we assimilate this knowledge, unless we understand it and practice it, then it all seems kind of strange. It seems disconnected from our reality. What does it mean? Fire that separated, Agni, separated from the mouth. Because one sense, Agni, intelligence is a kind of digestive power. Unless we have intelligence, we can't understand what's being said. It's like if you want to learn a language, then you have to digest the sound vibration to understand it with your intelligence. Otherwise, it just seems like gibberish. You may know so many languages, but someone's speaking a language you don't know, and you think, how can these people possibly understand what's being conveyed here? It's just some kind of gibberish sound. But for people who know, who have the intelligence to hear it, it makes perfect sense, because they have the intelligence to digest it. So digestion, intelligence, is all part of fire, tejas, which is a manifestation of Krishna's chit shakti for knowledge. So that's separated from the mouth. So it's not that here in the Bhagavatam they're just speaking some kind of nonsense. That Srila Vyasadeva was in the Himalayas. He got a little bored, found all these plants around there, experimented with some of them, and suddenly got all kinds of realizations, all kinds of new ideas, and started to write them down in this Bhagavatam. And so now we have a lot of fantastic ideas which come out of ultimately the sources, all kinds of plants that Srila Vyasadeva was experimenting in the Himalayas with. No, it's actually perfect sense, 100% consistent with reality. The problem is that we may not be quite in reality or quite be able to digest it with our intelligence, what's being said here, and therefore for us it sounds like a foreign language, all kinds of gibberish coming out of the Bhagavatam. Therefore, Bhagavatam is an advanced book. Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Rasoham apsnu kontiya pravasi shasti suryo pranavasara vedeshu shabdake purusham nishu. That I'm the taste of water, the light and the sun and the moon, the syllable Om and the Vedic mantras, the sound and ether and the ability of man. And Krishna goes on in many different ways. Punya, Ganda, Prithivyam Cha, Tejas, Chasmi, Vivavaso, Jivanam Sarabhuteshu, Tapas Chasmi, Tapas Vishu. That I am the smell in the earth. Punyam, Ganda, Prithivyam Cha, Tejas, Chasmi, I'm the heat and the fire. So if we could try, for instance, to drink water and remember Krishna. Now for us, because we've been separated by so many false understandings of things, unfortunately, because we've been grown up in a society, in cultures, especially in Kali Yuga, where instead of developing our intelligence, by modern education, they've taken our intelligence away by so much false propaganda. So we look at the sun, we see a ball of fire floating in the air, and we've been taught that the scientists who know everything, they've determined it's just by chance, it's just by accident that some huge ball of fire happens to be floating through the air. And we believe it because we've been brainwashed. We actually believe what these foolish people are saying. People who are on the same level, or as Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, that Kalo Sudra Sambhava, by birth we've been born as Shudras in the mode of ignorance. And then by modern education we become less than animals. And we're so convinced of how advanced we are that we actually believe we're advanced. We actually believe we know something when actually all we have is minuses. And for that reason, the whole society has simply become degraded. Instead of advancing the human form of life from Jayate Janmana Shudra, Samskara Bhavat Dvija, instead of advancing towards realizing or understanding, at least theoretically, that we're not this body, people are simply becoming more and more absorbed in the bodily concept of life. And they think they're educated. They think they know something, but actually their whole knowledge is simply wrong, is zero, or less than zero, is negative. That's why we have such a difficult time. When we take water, we remember it's Krishna, because we don't believe it. We believe it's my water. I deserve this water. I work for it. I paid for it. It's $3. Why shouldn't I enjoy it? We don't realize it's been given. That $3 came from Krishna. The intelligence to get it came from Krishna. The water was manifested as Krishna's energy. And therefore we take everything for granted, that we deserve everything. We're privileged. We're Americans. Of course we deserve everything. Just by taking birth in the sacred land of America, we deserve more than we're getting. It's only because some demons in other countries have become envious of our freedom, they're taking it away. Our freedom to exploit the material nature unrestrictedly. So this is all we have to recognize, that we've been brainwashed with so many false conceptions, and try to at least pay reverence to Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, that I'm crazy, I'm surrounded by all kinds of crazy people in this world. If I listen to these crazy people, if I go on the internet and listen to all this nonsense they're saying, then I become even more crazy than I already am. That unless I'm seeing things from the Bhagavatam, then I'm simply going deeper into ignorance. And when I can see Krishna, and that Krishna's, all this energy is Krishna's energy, and therefore I must utilize it for his service, according to Guru's, under the direction of Guru, Sadhana, and Shastra. And Krishna, if I'm taking shelter of Guru, Sadhana, and Shastra, then Krishna will help me within the heart as a super soul, and let me understand what Guru, Sadhana, and Shastra is saying. Not that Guru, Sadhana, and Shastra is saying something and I don't like it. Krishna, tell me something different. No, Krishna is going to say, all right, you don't like Guru, Sadhana, and Shastra. I'll give you my own a new version of the Bhagavatam. No, Guru, Sadhana, and Shastra is speaking to us, and we have the opportunity by listening to them. And then if we're sincere, try to understand, then Krishna within our heart He'll explain it to us. Dadami buddhi yogam tam. If we show some desire to put it into practice, to practice it with enthusiasm, then Krishna will give us more and more understanding of what's being said, and then eventually we'll be able to see it everywhere, all the time, by revelation coming from Krishna. Hare Krishna. So, if we hear, we remember what we've heard, because we're always remembering something. Whatever we think is important, we remember. If we remember what we heard, we try to understand it, assimilate it, digest it. Pray to Krishna to help us understand it. And then actually see it with our eyes, that it's real, it's not just some theory, but it's actually happening around us. And then apply it, especially as a Madhyama Adhikari. Try to love Krishna without trying to get something back from him. Try to serve, appreciate the devotees, and cooperate with them, especially to help each other advance in Krishna consciousness, and to help the innocent understand that they're actually Krishna's servants too, and defeat the atheistic propaganda that there is no God, and that we're all God, or that amongst the gods there's a few chosen gods. So, if we try to understand that, work according to that understanding, then Krishna will help, and gradually these realizations will come, and our lives will become meaningful and happy, and free from these anxieties that we're this body, and there's something else happening other than Krishna. So I'll stop there, thank you. Any questions or comments? Yes, all right. Oh yeah, it's in the Bhagavatam, but it's part of Ayurveda. It's part of all the Vedic sciences describe that. Ayurveda, Jyotirveda, Vastuveda, everything. But it's also in the Bhagavatam, because Bhagavatam gives us the understanding. So we read this. Yeah. When it describes the elements, there's part of it where it describes how, also intelligence, what the functions of intelligence, like remembrance and forgetfulness and discrimination and doubt is a function of intelligence. So, yeah, there's also, we look through the Bhagavatam, there'll be some similar things. But it's just common sense. I mean, after all, fire, if you put something in fire, it definitely gets transformed. And even if you put something into water, generally it may not, if it gets transformed, it's because there's some element of fire in the water also. You put something into ice water, it's very unlikely to dissolve. You put something into boiling water, because the element of fire is greater, therefore it's much greater likely to dissolve. So it's the element of fire that transforms things from one state to the next. So basically, our whole philosophy is just what we've observed. It's nothing really new. It's just a question of seeing what we're already seeing. Getting the intelligence to actually see what we're already seeing. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gananjana Salakaya. So we're just removing the cataract of ignorance, that's all, and then everything becomes simple and clear. Anything else? Therefore, sometimes, even in our society, people don't appreciate the Vedic knowledge. They think, oh, it's Jyotirveda, how quaint. Ayurveda, how quaint. We have much more sophisticated sciences nowadays. We don't have these quaint sciences from these ancient people who actually believe that, everything came out of God, and there's forces of nature like karma, and people suffer due to, they have an improper diet. They don't believe in science, that science can cure everything. that your thoughts actually influence your health, what you eat influences your health. They don't believe that it's all kind of quaint, because these people are just inadequate. They don't know how to enjoy the material energy. Therefore they come up with all kinds of crazy things like you have to follow a diet, or you have to have proper thinking, or you have to actually relate to people in a way according to the laws of God. So in modern society, they've rejected everything godly, including all the Vedic sciences, and therefore they're always striving in the wrong direction. Everything they're doing is a mistake. Etam drishtim avashtavya, nashtatmano na buddhaya, pravanyuga karmana shayedya gato hita. Following such conclusions and laws to themselves, the demoniac create horrible, unbeneficial works which are meant to destroy the world. So we're thinking technology is actually helping us advance. Yes, it is helping us advance to the darkest regions of existence. Previously, people had to walk to hell, but now you can take a jet plane. And the so-called spiritual, so-called material advancement. Simply, you have a smartphone for stupid people. People have no memory. It's all in the computer. People become slower and slower, and the computers are becoming faster and faster. And they think that's advancement. All right, anything else? Yes.
We also know that we can use all these technologies we have nowadays for preaching or whatever, but would you, Maharaj, say that it's better to not have them at all this type of technologies, whatever is there?
No, we need technology for now, but ultimately we can see in the spiritual world there is no technology. There's no same kind of fire technology that we have now, which is burning everyone up, their brains up. Spiritual world, Krishna is just herding cows, dancing with the gopis. The gopis, they don't have a blender. They're churning personally the milk to make yogurt and butter. They don't seem to need technology. It's not that they're completely in ignorance, they don't know about technology. Now when we get back to the spiritual world, we can make a big business. We can set up our own internet connections here. But for now we need it because just like Krishna invented this technology ultimately so that Prabhupada could travel around the world and spread Krishna consciousness. That's what it was meant for. So we can utilize the technology, but we have to be careful. We utilize it for Krishna's service. Otherwise, sometimes we may get carried away with the technology and become enamored by it. So if we're using Krishna's service to be more effective in spreading Krishna consciousness, more efficient in spreading, then it's very good. But ultimately, our use of that technology in that way will eventually come to the time when this technology will be seen as unnecessary. Because people will settle into nice communities, the farm communities, they'll actually protect the cows and the bulls. That technology we need, how to protect the cow and the bull. How to live off the land, live simply, and at the same time develop our consciousness in Krishna consciousness. Emphasize more of the development of our consciousness than try to exploit the material nature, which is what ultimately technology and industrialization is meant for. Ultimately it's just a substitute for protecting the cow and the bull, because it's just like if we don't protect the cow and the bull, then we're going to have to get tractors to plow the land. And to get the tractors, we're going to have oil and machinery. And therefore we're going to have huge boats transporting goods, drilling into the earth and transporting the oil, and then have all kinds of factories produce the tractors to till the earth, all because we've killed the cow and the bull, because we're not utilizing them properly. So we've created so much ugra karma just because we're sinful and we're killing the animals, especially the cow and the bull. Therefore we've created such complications And we think that's advancement. We could have simply gotten our food, which is the basic of economic development, very simply. Instead, we've made it so complicated, and we think that's advancement. But actually, it's just advancement. The more we get advanced that way, the more our intelligence is taken away, that's all. The more we make life difficult for ourselves. The more there's climate change, the more people become antagonistic to each other, the more our bodies become broken down and suffer from different diseases, because we're engaged in ugra karma, sinful activity. Anything else? Thank you very much. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai, Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande.